Every morning we wake up with a silent companion, the worn-out shadow of who we used to be. It whispers that we cannot change, that our past defines us, that failure still clings to our back. But that isn't truth. It's a prison built from old beliefs, outdated habits, and fears that once felt real but now are only echoes. Marcus Aurelius and the Stoic philosophers never encouraged shallow self-improvement. They called for a shedding of skin, radical, cold, and intentional. Not to become someone else, but to become fully ourselves, a version unshackled from past mistakes, untouched by delay or fear. This isn't short-term motivation, it's a war strategy. A battle against the outdated self within us, and every choice we make today, no matter how small, is a deliberate strike toward our own liberation. 1. Action. No negotiation. There's an old version of you that still lives in every act of procrastination, in every time you say, maybe tomorrow, in the habit of choosing what's easy over what's right. That version doesn't scream or make noise, but it lingers in your mind like an old friend who keeps pulling you back to the comfort zone. It's the one who gave up before seeing results, who waited for inspiration to start, who made excuses like no time or no energy. But if you want to live with intention, if you truly want to escape the cycle of aimless repetition, you must face one truth. That version must die. And it only dies when you start acting without negotiation. Marcus Aurelius didn't wait to feel good before stepping onto the battlefield. He acted because it was necessary, regardless of his mood. The Stoics knew that action does not depend on inspiration. Right action happens even when you're tired, confused, or unmotivated. If you keep waiting to feel ready, you may be waiting your entire life. And in that waiting, the old self stays alive, keeps winning, keeps you trapped in the loop of stagnation and self-pity. The difference between those who grow and those who stay stuck is not in their circumstances, but in how they make decisions in the briefest moments. When the alarm goes off but you want 5 more minutes, when your work is waiting but you scroll instead, when the workout reminder pops up but you hit dismiss. These moments are small, but they are where your fate is forged. The old self will choose ease, comfort, delay. But you, if you want to become new, must choose the opposite. Choose to act, even when you don't feel ready, even without motivation, even when no one is watching. Acting without negotiation doesn't mean being rigid. It means being loyal to your principles. When you set a rule for yourself, wake at 6, write for 30 minutes, no social media before work, you keep it. Not because anyone's forcing you, but because you are building someone you can trust. Every time you do what you said you'd do, you reclaim power from the old self. You no longer live by feeling, but by standard. And that is where freedom begins. Not freedom to do anything you want, but freedom from being ruled by emotion and delay. It will feel hard. That's the sign you're on the right path. The old self will fight to survive. It will whisper that you need rest, need flexibility, need to love yourself more. But remember, that softness is what got you stuck. There is no easy road to real change. If you want a different life, you must make different choices. Choose action even without guarantees, without applause, and especially when your mind gives you every reason to quit. 2. Rebuilding yourself is a deliberate act. No one accidentally becomes a better version of themselves. Inner evolution does not happen just because time passes. It doesn't come from good wishes or vague hopes. It comes from a decision clear, intentional, and irreversible. The decision that you will no longer live the way you used to. It begins when you look honestly at who you are, without sugarcoating, without excuses, and say, I've lived in this body long enough, but this version of me no longer serves me. Reinventing yourself isn't an inspiring slogan, it's a radical act, carried out not in a single burst of energy, but in a long sequence of firm, repeated choices. Epictetus once said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." It sounds simple, but it holds a cold truth. To become the new you, you must bury the old. You cannot live as two people at once, one trying to move forward, the other pulling you back. Most people don't fail because they lack the ability to change, but because they refuse to part with their old identity even when it's worn out, toxic, and the cause of repeated suffering. They cling to it because it's familiar. They fear the void that comes from letting go of old beliefs, roles they've mastered. But that familiarity is the shackle. Stoics never built their identity on permanence. They saw the self as clay shaped by the behaviors, thoughts, and values we repeat. This means you are not trapped in the image others gave you, nor forever defined by your past mistakes. You can choose again, not just once, but every day. But it demands the hardest work. Peeling off layers of limiting beliefs, dismantling old fears, and standing inside the uncertainty of the untested self, the one not yet known, but not yet broken by your history. Reinvention is a path of conscious choices. You choose silence when the old self would rage. You choose action when it would make excuses. You choose to press on when it would turn back. And each time you strengthen the new identity, not with slogans, but with a lived code. You don't need applause to confirm you're changing. Real transformation needs no witnesses. It only needs you to keep moving forward, one small step, one clear choice, one moment at a time when you refuse to become the old you again, no matter how hard it is. 3. Your mind is the battlefield. Your greatest enemy doesn't live out there. It's not a difficult boss, a backstabbing friend, or unfair circumstances. The most dangerous enemy always lives within, in the whispers of your mind that you've listened to for so long, you no longer question them. It's the voice that says, "This is just who I am. I'm not good enough. I'll just fail again." Old scripts written by fear, repeated until they become doctrine. And if you're not awake, you'll spend your life as a side character in your own story, guided by beliefs you've never even tested. Seneca once warned, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." That's not just true, it's a wake-up call. Most of the fatigue, anxiety, and limitation you feel doesn't come from the outside world, but from the story you keep telling yourself. The mind isn't neutral ground. It is a battlefield where every thought, every judgment, every inner whisper is an arrow. Some pierce your potential, others slowly drain your self-worth. And if you let them fly unchecked, you'll lose long before the world ever touches you. Stoics understood that thoughts shape emotions, emotions shape actions, and actions shape destiny. So they learned to monitor their inner flow like a general scanning the terrain. No thought gets to come and go at will. Every time a negative idea appears, "I can't do this. No one cares. I always fail." They didn't respond emotionally, but rationally. They asked, "Is this true? Do I have evidence? Does this help me move forward or hold me back?" And if it didn't serve growth, they replaced it not with blind optimism, but with grounded truth, realistic insight, and concrete action. Your mind cannot stay empty. If you don't fill it with deliberate beliefs, it will default to what's familiar, even if that means doubt, insecurity, or fear. Every time you let a limiting thought pass unchallenged, you're feeding the old self. And each time you meet a weak thought and replace it with a strong act, You begin to dismantle the old belief system, the one that kept you small all these years. Reinvention begins in the mind, but it doesn't end there. Understanding isn't enough. You must act to reinforce the new insight. When you think, "I'm not good at speaking," don't just affirm, "I can learn." Pick up the phone. Start a conversation. When you think, "I can't change," don't just repeat mantras. Do what the old self wouldn't do. Only when thought is followed by action are you truly rewriting the strategy of the greatest battlefield, your own mind. 4. Burn the comfort zone. Everyone has a comfort zone, not a place, but a set of habits, behaviors, and thoughts that feel safe, familiar, and non-threatening. In that zone, you know what's coming. Even if the results are bad, you feel at ease because they're predictable. You're not challenged, not forced to face fear, and no one is pressuring you to grow. But what few dare to admit is that the comfort zone is not a place to live. It is a padded prison where dreams erode silently, day by day. And if you don't burn it down, it will bury the best version of you. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The obstacle to action advances action." That's not just a philosophical statement, it's a strategic command. Every time you avoid discomfort, you're not just delaying growth, you're feeding the old version of yourself. That version thrives on ease. 10 more minutes of sleep, skipping a workout, putting off the important task, saying maybe later. Each of those small actions isn't harmless laziness. They are bricks in the wall that keeps you locked in mediocrity. The truth is, you won't find a new self under the morning blanket, in the familiar chair after work, or in the endless scroll of evening distractions. You won't evolve while everything remains comfortable. Change happens at the edge where familiar meets unfamiliar, where control meets chaos, where comfort meets discomfort. That's where you tremble, sweat, and feel like you're doing something wrong. And that's also where the old limits begin to crack. The Stoics didn't seek ease. They chose to live by principles, to step into difficulty to forge inner strength. For them, resistance wasn't a sign to stop, it was a signal to proceed. Every time you choose the hard thing, you burn part of your comfort zone. When you speak up in the meeting instead of staying silent, when you show up at the gym even when your mind begs to rest, when you turn down a casual invite to stay home and focus, you're doing more than taking action. You're redrawing your map, expanding the territory where you can breathe freely. No one grows in comfort. The comfort zone isn't a home, it's a rest stop. Stay too long, and you lose the fire. You stop dreaming, stop advancing, and start making excuses for standing still. So if you find yourself too comfortable, it's time to question everything. If life feels too easy, maybe you're not growing. And if you're serious about killing the old self, you must step out, not when inspired, not when someone tells you to, but on your own into the hard space where real change begins in the things you once feared. 5. Cut the echo of the past. You don't live in the past, but the past can live in you. It doesn't show up as specific events or vivid moments, but hides in guilt, regret, shame, or bitterness. These emotions don't come from the present, they are echoes, sounds that rise from old mistakes, wrong choices, or moments you wish you could redo. And if you don't learn how to sever those echoes, they'll continue to rule you quietly, but forcefully, as if they still hold power in your life today. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." That applies to memory too. You can't change what happened, but you can change how you carry it. What makes the past a burden isn't the past itself. It's your choice to keep carrying it into every new day. You recall a mistake, Replay it like an old tape without a stop button. Each time you revive what should be dead. Each time you retell the story of pain or failure, you're feeding oxygen to a flame that should have burned out. Stoics don't deny the past, but they refuse to let it define the present. They see it as a vault of lessons, not a place to live forever. If there's a lesson to learn, learn it. If there's a wrong to correct, correct it. But don't confuse learning with self-punishment. No one becomes better by gnawing on old errors. You can't move forward if you keep looking back. You can't feel light if you drag old dialogues, old what-ifs, and old why did I scripts from one month to the next. That's not reflection, it's self-imprisonment. The old you is built from unhealed memories. It lives through the stories you keep telling yourself that you're a failure, abandoned, unworthy, or a destroyer of good things. But those are just stories. They're not fate. They're not law. They exist only because you keep repeating them unconsciously, out of habit. And like all habits, they can be broken if you have the awareness and the courage to stop the narrative. Cutting the echo of the past doesn't mean forgetting, it means refusing to let the past speak for the present. Each time an old memory resurfaces, you can choose a different response. Instead of surrendering, you can say, I am no longer that person. Instead of blame, say, I've learned that lesson. And instead of letting it define you, ask, what new thing can I build from this experience? That is how the Stoic acts, not by erasing the past, but by reclaiming authority over the present. 6. Take responsibility. No excuses. Nothing keeps you stuck longer than blame. When you blame others, circumstances, or fate, you may feel momentarily relieved, but the cost is your personal power. Because once you assign responsibility to something beyond your control, you also surrender the ability to change the outcome. Your old self excels at this. It has a long list of reasons. Unsupportive parents, bad schooling, bad luck, people who hurt you. It all sounds valid, but behind every excuse is one bitter truth: you're still not ready to take full ownership of yourself. Stoics don't seek ideal fairness in life. They don't live under the illusion that the world will always treat them right, that good people always win, or that being kind guarantees ease. They accept life as it is, sometimes unfair, sometimes wrong, sometimes against you, but that matters less than how you respond. Marcus Aurelius didn't write to blame traitors, he wrote to discipline himself in the face of betrayal. Epictetus, once a slave, didn't curse his fate, he taught, don't ask that things happen as you wish. Wish for them to happen as they do, and you will be serene. You're not responsible for where you were born, how you were raised, or who hurt you, but you are responsible for how you heal, how you respond, how you act from here forward. True change begins the moment you stop saying, I'm this way because of them, and start saying, I'm responsible for myself. Not for guilt, but for freedom. Taking responsibility doesn't mean carrying the world's weight. It means admitting that no matter the cause, the result is now in your hands. If you're dissatisfied with life, look squarely at what you've allowed, the habits you haven't changed, the choices you've postponed, the things you know are wrong but tolerate. The old self will always justify, it's not the right time, I'm too busy, I don't have the resources. But if you want to evolve, you must stop negotiating with excuses. Remember, all excuses have one thing in common: they make you feel better about not changing. That's why they are the enemy of growth. Stoics don't run from responsibility with rationalizations. They carry it because they know Only when you own your story do you have the power to rewrite it, your past, your present, your future, and the person you are becoming. When you stop blaming, something extraordinary happens. You reclaim full ownership. There's no one left to wait on, nothing left to complain about, only you and the next choice. And in that moment, the old version of you, the one built on blame, delay, and excuse, begins to lose its voice. That silence is not an end. It is the beginning of a life where you are no longer the victim, you are the one leading the way. 7. Discipline matters more than emotion. The old version of you always waits for inspiration before acting. It believes the right emotion must come first. Before any work begins, that motivation is the prerequisite for every move. That's why it keeps delaying, keeps waiting until it feels right, and keeps cycling through bursts of enthusiasm followed by long disappointment. But growth does not come from emotional impulse, it comes from quiet discipline. The Stoics understood that emotions are ever-changing, but discipline is the solid foundation that anchors us through every passing mood. Discipline doesn't ask, "Do you feel like it?" It only asks, "Is this the right thing to do?" And if it is, you do it regardless of your mood. You may be sad, tired, lazy, or unmotivated, but if you've committed to exercising every morning, you still get out of bed. If you've promised yourself to write every day, you still open the laptop even with a blank mind. This isn't forced obedience. It's loyalty to the person you're striving to become. And that loyalty is proven only through action, not when it's easy, but precisely when you don't feel like it. Emotions are human, but discipline builds depth. What you do when everything goes well doesn't define you as clearly as what you keep doing when nothing supports you. Discipline doesn't seek a spotlight. It happens in quiet mornings, in moments when you reject the snooze button, when you choose not to delay, when you refuse to react based on fleeting emotion. Every such act is a strike that cuts the thread tying you to the old self, the one who only functions when emotions align, who always finds reasons to delay, who always waits for the perfect moment. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Get up at once and do what your nature requires." Not because you're excited, but because it must be done. The Stoic does not deny emotion, but refuses to be ruled by it. They know that if discouragement determines action, stagnation becomes destiny. If laziness guides your steps, all your goals remain dreams. Emotions are like passing clouds. Discipline is the solid pillar that keeps you from drifting with them. When you act consistently, regardless of mood, you are building a new self, one no longer manipulated by feelings or driven by inertia. You begin to reclaim inner power. You begin to trust yourself because you've shown that you can do what's difficult, even when it's uncomfortable. That is the foundation of real self-respect, not from results, but from the process of keeping promises to yourself every single day. And it is these silent, repeated actions without cheer, without excitement that mark the decline of the old self. The old self lives by excuses. The new one lives by commitment, and commitment can only be strengthened through discipline, the force that moves forward, even when emotion refuses to follow. 8. Lower the ego. Learn again from the start. Your old self doesn't only live in your actions, it hides in what you assume to be true. It exists in silent pride, in thoughts like, "I already know that. I understand how the world works. I don't need anyone to teach me anything new." The old ego won't let you relearn because relearning means admitting you were wrong, that you misunderstood, that perhaps for years you've been living by a worldview that no longer fits. And for an ego unwilling to be shaken, that's a heavy blow. But the Stoics understood, if you're unwilling to lower your ego, you cannot raise your character. Epictetus once said, "No man can learn what he thinks he already knows." That cuts straight to the root of the problem. Complacency is the greatest barrier to growth. When you believe you've seen enough, know enough, and are already right, you leave no room for questioning, for constructive doubt, for looking at the world with a student's eyes. Yet that humble gaze is the foundation of true development. No one becomes wise by always trying to be right. They become wise by having the courage to admit they were wrong and by seeking correction, not defense. Stoics didn't care for the appearance of wisdom. They didn't flaunt knowledge or need to prove they were clever. What they sought was clarity, and clarity only comes to those humble enough to re-examine themselves, as if for the first time. That's why people who live by Stoic philosophy are always learning, always reflecting, always ready to question even what seems unshakable. Because they know, the bigger the ego, the smaller the truth, and the smaller the ego, the bigger the truth. Relearning from scratch doesn't make you weaker. It frees you from the limits the old ego built. It lets you discard outdated assumptions, beliefs you adopted without reflection, and conclusions you held simply because they felt safe. When you lower the ego, you're no longer threatened by difference, no longer defensive when challenged, and no longer afraid to admit you're learning again. On the contrary, you feel grateful to see the world with new eyes, ones not blurred by bias, not blinded by life experience. Your old self depends on certainty to survive. It wants control. It wants to believe it's always been right, but that's an illusion and it halts your evolution. If you're serious about reinventing yourself, you must be willing to dismantle what you once believed, once defended, once called foundational. Not to be aimless, but to rebuild on stronger ground where you're no longer afraid of not knowing, and therefore can learn anything. True learning only begins when you're ready to lower your ego and accept that you're not the expert in this life, that what was right yesterday might no longer be right today, and that the next great teacher may not be a guru, but life itself. Through a small failure, a blunt piece of feedback, or a moment when you have to start over from the beginning. 9. Forge yourself through voluntary hardship. No one grows stronger by avoiding difficulty. Every person with strong inner discipline has walked through storms they chose to face. That's not recklessness or blind masochism. It's a clear philosophy. If you don't place yourself in hardship, then when life forces it upon you, you'll collapse. That's why Stoics don't wait for misfortune to train themselves. They seek difficulty so that their mind and body grow familiar with discomfort, and when real suffering arrives, they are not panicked, not surprised, not shaken, for they've already trained in advance. Seneca practiced voluntary discomfort. He slept on cold floors instead of soft beds, ate plain food when he could afford delicacies, wore coarse clothes instead of silk, not to show off hardship, but to remind himself, if he lost everything, he'd still be okay. When you place yourself in lack, you learn to detach from comfort. When you choose cold, hunger, or solitude, you discover that what you thought was essential is not the root of peace. And when you endure without complaint, you begin to see yourself differently, not fragile, but firm and self-reliant. Forging yourself through challenge is an intentional act of eliminating what remains soft in you. It's when you run one more mile though your body begs to stop, when you turn off your phone to sit with your unresolved thoughts, when you say no to tempting ease to say yes to your long-term goals. These acts are not loud or dramatic, but they carve a message deep into your mind. I no longer live by emotion. I am being forged. And every day you do the hard thing, you stretch your capacity to endure, you build a thicker layer of inner strength, not to grow cold, but to become unbreakable. Your old self cannot survive long in a disciplined environment. It thrives on ease. It fears cold, pain, silence, uncertainty. So when you begin practicing voluntary hardship, you cut off its fuel supply. It will resist, complain, try to convince you that this is too much, that no one's asking you to do this, that you can rest just this once. But you don't need a reason to persevere. You only need to remember, comfort doesn't help you grow. Only challenge does. Each time you reject unnecessary ease, each time you accept discomfort without retreat, each time you walk willingly into the hard path, you send a clear message. I am a person of intention, not swayed by emotion, not thrown off by circumstance. And when you repeat this long enough, you don't just become strong, you become unshakable, because you no longer fear challenge. You've learned to use it as part of your becoming. 10. Remember you are dying. We live as if we had forever. We postpone what matters, telling ourselves, there will be a better time. I'll start next week. Once things settle down, I'll live true to myself. But Marcus Aurelius reminded us in one short, almost cold sentence. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think. To the Stoics, death is not taboo, nor is it a shadow to fear. It is a silent companion, always present, reminding us that time is finite, and you don't know how much of it you have left. When you truly let that sink in, everything begins to shift. Petty anger no longer matters. Pointless arguments seem absurd. Procrastination, half-living, chasing what isn't yours, suddenly feels like a terrible waste. Death clarifies everything, and it's the blade that cuts through the trivial and exposes the essential. What are you doing with this life? And more importantly, why haven't you begun? You don't need a crisis to wake up. Stoics don't wait for illness, loss, or accidents to reflect. They practice memento mori, the remembrance of death, daily. They write it, think about it, carry it in every act. Not to become pessimistic, but to remain alert. Because once you realize each day might be your last, you start living as if it's the only one that counts. You stop delaying. You stop performing. You stop living by other people's expectations. And you begin living like a free person. Death teaches more clearly than any philosophy. It asks, if today were your last, what would you choose to do? What would you say? What would you let go of? And if your answers are far from the life you're living now, then maybe you don't need more time, you need the courage to change. Because time is not the issue. The trade-off is. How many days have you spent on things you don't believe in, with people you don't respect, maintaining habits that are slowly destroying you? The old version of you thrives on the illusion that time is abundant. It believes life will get more stable, less busy, less stressful someday, and it uses those ideas to justify delaying change. But the truth is the opposite. Time is slipping away, hour by hour, minute by minute. And if you don't kill the part of you that delays, death will do it for you, not metaphorically, but literally. Live as if you are dying, because you are. Your body is aging. Opportunities don't repeat. The people you love are living finite lives too. And every day you don't live fully is a day stolen from yourself. You don't have to become obsessed with death, but let it stay close enough so you never forget. This isn't a rehearsal. This is the real thing, and you do not get to live it halfway because there will be no second take. I used to think that to change myself, I needed a strong surge of inspiration or some push from the outside. But the truth is, no one can change you but you, and there's no better time than now. What woke me up wasn't a dramatic event, but a quiet realization. If I don't kill the old version of me, I'll keep living a life that isn't truly mine, steered by habit, fear, and the stories I keep telling myself. That doesn't happen in one day, it happens in the small acts. When I get up, even if I don't feel like it, when I refuse to make excuses, when I do the right thing without waiting for the right mood. I've learned that discipline isn't a cage, it's real freedom. And when I began living as if each day was a rebirth, I finally saw it clearly. The new self doesn't come from desire. It comes from behavior. The old self doesn't fade on its own, it has to be replaced, one decision at a time. If you found value in what was just shared, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss upcoming content. And remember, no one is reborn just because time passes. You can only be reborn through action. Today, in each moment, you're alive. See you in the next video.